Have you ever sent a stakeholder an email and they didn't reply? You look at your inbox the next morning, nothing. You wait another day, still nothing. And then, without really noticing it, a little story starts forming in your head. They're not interested. Then they don't support the project. Then perhaps they're probably going to try to block it. And suddenly you've gone from they haven't replied to they're against me. And here's the interesting thing, you might be completely wrong. But by this point, you've probably already changed the way you behave towards them. You stop involving them, you become more defensive in your next meeting. You start preparing arguments for a disagreement that hasn't even happened. And your stakeholder is sitting there thinking, why has the PM suddenly become so difficult to work with? This is the Ladder of Inference, a framework developed by Harvard organisational psychologist Chris Argyris as part of his work on how people reason and learn in organisations. It's one of the most useful concepts I've come across for understanding stakeholder behaviour. When we intelligent people make these assumptions and conclusions, there is a great danger for more misunderstanding and stakeholder relationships becoming strained. The ladder starts with something very simple. At the bottom of the ladder, this is what actually happened. The observable data in our first example, you sent an email, they didn't respond. That's it. That's all you actually know. But human beings are remarkably good at filling in the gaps. We select certain information, we give it meaning, we make assumptions, and then we treat those assumptions as if they were facts. So our ladder might look something like this. They didn't reply, they must have seen it, they're not interested, they don't support my proposal, they're going to challenge it, I need to get ahead of them. And notice what happened. The further up the ladder we climb, the further we get from what we actually observed. And we do this all day. Imagine you're in a steering committee, you present your roadmap, the CFO looks at you and says, I'm not convinced this is the right priority. What do you hear? Perhaps finance doesn't understand product, or they only care about short-term costs, or they're going to cut my roadmap. But what did the CFO actually say? I'm not convinced this is the right priority. That's the observable fact. Everything else is interpretation. And here's another one. Your engineering lead says the deadline is ambitious. What do you hear? Engineering doesn't want to commit, maybe. Or they're going to use this as an excuse to delay the project. Maybe, but perhaps they're simply telling you there's a significant technical risk here. Same words, completely different interpretation. And here is where it gets really dangerous. Once we've made an assumption, we tend to look for evidence that confirms it. So imagine you've decided, my stakeholder doesn't support this project. Now, they ask a difficult question in a meeting and you think, there we go, I knew it. They don't attend your next workshop. See, they're disengaged. They ask for more data. They're trying to undermine me. Every new piece of information gets interpreted through the story you've already created, and eventually your assumption starts feeling like a fact. This is one reason stakeholder relationships can deteriorate without anyone deliberately doing anything wrong. You aren't necessarily responding to your stakeholder, you're responding to your interpretation of your stakeholder. So, what do you do about it? The answer is not to stop making assumptions. That's impossible. Our brains are designed to make sense of incomplete information. The trick is to notice when you've climbed the ladder. When you find yourself thinking, they're trying to block this, pause and ask yourself, what do I actually know? Perhaps the answer is they asked 3 challenging questions. Good, that's data. Then ask, what am I adding to that data? I'm assuming that they don't support the project. And then there's one final question I find incredibly useful. What else could explain what I'm seeing? Maybe they don't oppose the project. Maybe they're worried about the risk. Maybe they have information you don't have. Maybe they're under pressure from their own stakeholders. Or maybe they're just having a terrible Tuesday. The best product and project managers know this. Influence isn't just about choosing the right argument. It's also about being careful with the stories you tell yourself about other people. Because the most dangerous stakeholder assumption isn't they disagree with me, it's I know why they disagree with me. You probably don't, not yet. So the next time a stakeholder doesn't respond, challenges your proposal, looks uncomfortable in a meeting, or says something that you don't like, don't immediately climb the ladder. Go back to the bottom. What actually happened? Because sometimes the biggest obstacle between you and your stakeholder isn't them, it's the story you've built about them. And once you learn to spot that, you can start managing stakeholders based on reality rather than inference. Thanks for watching. If you want to know more about workplace psychology, there is the Abilene paradox explained in the video on the screen right now.